Hi Tim, Sean here, just to give a response to your video that you just sent out, in fact your 7 videos around creating your Hexworld idea. I thought it was absolutely fantastic, so I thought the least I can do is video response quickly. And this will give a snapshot of hopefully the first response coming in. I'll probably be I guess I'm the forerunner for other people's ideas, so I think hopefully what this will do is, because it's a quick response, it might give people some ideas and some points about what you're looking for. I think this is what you're looking for, so here goes. So starting off, the way that I see my territory that my race comes from, my race is called the Laconis. Now the Laconis, think of creatures like lizard men, because they're very much like that. Tough, strong, they have that type of plating to the skin, gills. Naturally from their past they would have come from the sea, but of course over a period of time they've begun to live above land, on the land longer. Now the Laconis themselves are generally, colour-wise, they tend to be quite green based, although there are tints of colour to the skin, but it's difficult for those who do not understand them to notice the differences. However, there are unusual ones born amongst their kind, which for those that, I'm using a very simple analogy here, for those that have actually that know the prismatic colours, effectively they originate from those prismatic colours, and that gives you also a sort of a clue as to the types of gifts that those creatures have. They are rare. Generally, those type of Laconis that are born of a different colour generally rise up into high society within the Laconis world. Now the Laconis by their very nature are actually, as a culture, they're quite simple in their view of things, and I'm just going to have a drink as we speak. Quite simple in their view of things, and very shamanic in their beliefs. So their culture exists of might is right, and often you could easily say that it's very feudal-based society now. Not a traditional feudal society, more a case of where people who rise up into power because of what they've done, and often it's through the sword, more so than the unusual. That's pretty much sums up their culture in a nutshell. It's very much might is right. Their belief systems is very superstitious. Being a seafaring race, which is really what they are now, they have learnt how to master the seas. Some of the early discoveries when they came above ground led them to tinker, play with, and begin to understand what was left behind. They believed these gifts were left behind by the very gods themselves. Actually, it was the First Age that left the gifts behind, which at this time the Laconis are beginning to utilise and develop upon, which I will cover off in a minute. Being very superstitious leads rise to many problems within their society, but equally, because of their superstitions, you have the very kinship that exists with amongst their kind. If they are attached to an overlord or a lord of some kind, they are esteemed to be part of its family, they will throw their life down to protect the lord. So they're very much as a family society in some ways. The map that I created, although it's not a hex map, is this one here, which I hope that you can view. You'll notice that as you look at the map, in the centre there seems to be a large whirlpool, and the northern territories are very ice-based. Although it's only a small hex, really 200 miles by 200 miles, the whirlpool, for some reason, creates 2 systems at this part. For convenience of the story that I'm weaving as I describe this, it's because of the fact that they lie more northerly within the zone of the hexes that exist, and the water and the way that it actually moves keeps 2 weather systems apart. Hence the territories to the north are very cold, and the territories to the south are very warm. The lizardmen themselves, actually, the Laconis, originate from deep below sea caves, and although these homes still exist, they have begun to make their living throughout this archipelago that exists here. This is not a land, as you will see, that is many large continents. In fact, it's fractured islands. So far there are at least a couple of hundred islands that are known to exist, but many are found continually at this point. What sort of exists within the way that this is set up is very simply this. Being a seafaring race that originates from caves, you can imagine the fact that they spend much of their time on the water. They've indeed some of the early gifts that they believe come from the gods as ships that they found, that they began to use, that they began to understand, that they began to read about. Naturally, with their natural affinity for the sea, it was inevitable that they would find a way to utilise the very power of the oceans itself. They fear two things: the whirlpool, which is known as the kraken to them. So the whirlpool is their kraken, and a creature which is known as the vivara. Now the vivara are huge creatures that inhabit the sea in packs. They are like huge whales, incredibly dangerous, treating ships that the Laconis use as enemy and targeting them and smashing them to pieces. The Laconis have begun to understand the enemy and have begun to understand the signs and have begun to know how to navigate the seas to avoid them. However, there are certain territories that are very difficult to reach, particularly the northern ones, because they are hidden by great ice packs and shelves. And the Laconis, at this point, are beginning to discover, they know the landmass exists, but have found exploring them more difficult because of their initial temperament. But they've now reached a point where they've begun to explore these lands and begun to settle them. And this has really only started to happen in the last few hundred years. So much of the settled areas are pretty primitive, although you would describe them as perhaps small towns or small hamlets. One thing that, again, seems to be a gift from the gods of the First Age, they have uncovered something which is called Miog gas. This gas can be harvested into leather material and blown up like our traditional balloons. They then have found that they can attach baskets to the bottom of this and then can navigate what they call the trade winds around these islands, as well as using the ships. Often a Miog balloon will be attached to a boat and used as a lookout point, which makes sense, but also it's equally dangerous for the lookout at times. The history of this place is fairly simple. 3,500 years ago there was an incredible cataclysm. I think that is all very, very clear to see from the map itself. Of course the Laconis do not know this. They just know that the gods once inhabited the land and left. They do not understand the fact that the cataclysm happened. There was a period of time when the Laconis began to come out from beneath their sea caves, began to explore. This was the Dark Age for the Laconis, before they found the light, before they realised these discoveries and how to utilise them. This is now known as the Second Age to the present time. The Laconis have begun to settle these lands, have begun to explore them. There are huge tracts of creatures on these lands that have yet to be discovered. Creatures that they are very fearful of. They're very by their very definition, they're nature-based. And the shamanic society amongst them is equally careful not to tamper with nature. So the forays so far into this uncharted world are minor at best. So you can imagine that the Laconis have only done, all they have done at this point is settle, perhaps, around the very fringes of these land masses. Because it is a seafaring race, and because it is very might is right, it is a very fractured society which is constantly warfaring and settling. The sea caves and their locations are hidden. The islands are also, their locations are hidden. So he who has ships, who has men, who has Laconis at his command, who has vessels, controls the waves. This is at the moment the world of Laconis, or water world. I hope that helps, and I hope that gives you some idea of my initial thoughts on it. My name's Sean Connors. Anyway, till the next time, take care of yourself, and this is a brilliant idea, Tim. Thank you very much for it.